it's tough because even some of the farmers we work with one-on-one are putting in hydroponic systems and putting in like the aquaponic systems. And, I'm just like, if that's what it takes to make your farm profitable, I'm glad that your farm's profitable because that's what's important. But I would just love to see you get away from that. And the way to get away from that is when they start understanding the soil biology and just what it takes to manage the soil right. Because that's the big thing is if you're on tough soil, if you're on soil that's not set up properly and your nutrients aren't balanced properly, yes, you're going to really struggle. And that quick fix seems like to come out of a bottle, unfortunately.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish soil-grown crops and pasture-raised livestock under the organic seal. You just heard from Michael Kilpatrick. He's an organic farmer and podcast host of the popular show, The Thriving Farmer. Michael is known for his excellent advice on how to plan your farm for success. Not just production success, but also financial success and how to find that work-life balance, which all farmers know is incredibly hard to find. His work is so important because we know that only about 1 in every 20 farms actually make it. And he's helping us do that. While it sounds a bit depressing, it does feel like today there's more support than ever for those of us who want to farm. So let's return to my interview with Michael and hear what he has to say about it. I am joined by Michael Kilpatrick, who many of you probably already know. He's usually on the other side of the table hosting his own podcast called Thriving Farmer Podcast. Michael, how does it feel to be on the other end of the seat, in the hot seat, if you will?
Well, it feels great. I'm excited to hear what you're going to ask.
So many people know a lot about you, but you just bought a new farm. Tell us what's going on in your life.
We did, yeah. So in 2015, we shut down our other farm. We leased out the land. We moved to Ohio so my wife could be near her family to raise our kids. And then we've been searching for the last 3 years for a farm property. And because I'm picky and because I guess we like old houses and all sorts of aspects, we just literally in March found the right location. And it took us a long time to close because it was a complicated situation. But here we are. We finally signed about actually 1st of July on this property. And the really cool thing is it's 8 acres of property. It's about 6 acres of prime soils, unlimited water beneath us, an 1890s house, which we're a sucker for old houses. It's got beautiful inlaid woodwork. It was definitely a fixer-upper, so it's taken us some time to kind of move our way in. But it's in a underserved community that literally, the grocery store, the greens are the canned green beans they have in the canned bean aisle. So we're so excited to be able to educate and feed this local community here, which the street we're on, Central Avenue, has 12,000 cars a day go by it. So it's a natural for a retail stand, and it's a natural for the agritourism and just bringing people on and showing them what it is like to have a sustainable, authentic farm.
Did you follow some of your own advice in terms of how to find prime farmland, or what did you not follow?
Yes, I think we didn't follow our budget is actually the truth, and that's part of the reason it took so long to close. We had to go through 3 different lenders before we could finally get one that, all right, I see your vision, okay, let's go for it. But, the one thing that we were a little disappointed about is last year, up until last year, is conventionally no-till farmed. And so last year it had 12 different herbicides on the property. So, it had the 2,4-D, it had the dicambia, it had the multiple types of Roundup. So that was something that we're a little disappointed and we're a little upset about that. But the cool thing is we know land regenerates, and that land with the right proper management will come back. So you can kind of see the field behind me, and that's actually seeded down to, I believe, an 8-way cover crop that we will be running all summer long. We just had enough moisture to germinate it, so we're super excited for the rainstorms that came through. But it definitely is going to be regenerated. We can't wait to start building greenhouses and really start to add compost and all of that to make the soil much better.
You got a property with a ton of herbicides on it. I started a greenhouse when we first got going, and I used a bunch of compost and manure and I got herbicide carryover from a lot of these newer, kind of really longer lasting. Surprisingly, 2,4-D doesn't last as long as some of the aminopyralids. That's what I got hit with. So yeah, hopefully you won't have, any symptoms on your plants. But are you planning on doing the 3-year transition over to organic?
Yeah, so when we actually came on site, that was one of the first things we did was test the ground for those herbicides, which means you basically put in a cover crop. And there's like oats and peas are 2 that are kind of like trigger crops. And if they come up, that means that there's none of the, I think it's the organic whatever, it's that nasty class of herbicides. So that wasn't in there. So that was really great. The 3-year transition to organic, we'll see. We'll see kind of like as the years progress, like what that looks like. We may certify, but we may not advertise that because again, we're in a very blue collar. We are in like the red belt of the U.S. So, that word organic is a trigger word, unfortunately, for a lot of people. Okay. And so yes, our Springboro customers, which is the next couple towns over where it's the higher income zip codes. Obviously, yes, on that, we'll talk about that. But locally here, we'll just say, we just grow it naturally. That's probably what we'll end with the story for them. And then once they start to get to know us and start to understand what we're trying to do, we can start educating them more about what organic is and the fact that we are organically certified just for that extra level protection for them.
I must be in a bubble. Why is that a trigger word for people?
Yeah, it's because it's one of those things where you have the very conventional farmers, and there's a lot of farmers out here. We're middle of Ohio. I mean, like literally, fields as far as the eye can see as soon as you get out of town. And to them, it's kind of like, it's just the whole other way of farming. They think organic people are trying to steal their land. Or it's just like, it was interesting. Like when we went certified organic in upstate New York, we had our farm and we were just really proud of it. We took the stickers and we put them on all the watermelon and we were excited about that. And we had this person come by and they looked at it and went, I want real watermelon. And I'm like, this is the realest watermelon you can get, but if you don't treasure that and you don't realize that, then I don't think we're going to have watermelon for you.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting because like the guy I had come do I don't own the big equipment because the big equipment is incredibly expensive and I only need it like twice a year to see the cover crop. So I hired that out and the guy came out, super nice guy, but he's like, yeah, you're organic and everything. So you can't use any pesticides and how are you going to manage the weeds and all that stuff. So, some of them are like trying to understand, but there's a fair aspect of them which just thinks they think it's a bunch of hogwash, baloney, and there's never a way that it can actually work. Because if you actually go out and look at, let's say, Farm Babe and some of those alternative farming channels, I like to call alternative farming because that's not the real type of farming. They are talking about how GMOs are great and how organics is this pie in the sky idea, which really doesn't work. And they, anytime there's an organic fraud, they're like, well, seriously, guys, it's not real. They're just pretending to be real, and they still use, the nasty stuff. So that's kind of what we'll feel. And it's one of those things where, and I said this to Elliot, and I don't know if he kind of took this the wrong way, but, when we're educating farmers, we try to keep that word organic sometimes off our initial pages. Because we know that there's so many farmers out there which are struggling to find the way forward in their farm. And they just need an alternative way. So, the whole no-till thing on large-scale acreage, that was new for them. Now I think it's getting incredibly accepted across the U.S., which is amazing. It actually... when you look at the soil health with the no-till versus conventionally tilled, we're seeing, soil health go up. Obviously, it's not as high as if it was organic, but it's going up. And so obviously, I'll take any change that we can get toward the right side. But going back to like our messaging is until we get people to know us, to like us, to trust us, we don't throw out that label a lot because we were trying to hook them into the whole aspect and the whole understanding that yes, farming can be profitable and yes, farming can be a lifestyle and a business. Because once we can convince them of that, then we can say how you go about that is through organic regenerative agriculture. But if we were to hit them first with organic regenerative, they would be, oh gosh, that's scary. And that's not what I want. And that it also reminds them sometimes of that organic crazy farmer they saw that had weeds, 8 or 9 feet tall. And,
right.
When they plowed up the field afterwards, there's bits of plastic all through it because he didn't pull his drip tape. So I think that's the other aspect that's what we're fighting against. But, we're now reaching a global audience where we're working with, our team just told me we have 83,000 people that have interacted, given us their email in the last year, interacted with one of our content, downloaded something from our sites. And we've, I think, 6 million media impressions in the last year as well. So, when you're talking those numbers, you're now starting to reach outside of this organic realm. And yes, once we get them in, boom, we go for it. We talk to them about the aspect of, the fake organic versus the real organic too, because that's a huge aspect of things too. And it's tough because even some of the farmers we work with one-on-one are putting in hydroponic systems and putting in like the aquaponic systems. And, I'm just like, if that's what it takes to make your farm profitable, I'm glad that your farm's profitable because that's what's important. But I would just love to see you get away from that. And the way they get away from that is when they start understanding the soil biology and just what it takes to manage the soil right. Because that's the big thing is if you're on tough soil, if you're on soil that's not set up properly and your nutrients aren't balanced properly, yes, you're going to really struggle. And that quick fix seems like to come out of a bottle, unfortunately.
Right. And so many, I think the biggest thing that, really brought the organic farmers together into the Real Organic Project was just that there was no transparency. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that any of these practices are better or worse. It's just organic farming has always been about fostering soil fertility, and hydroponic, when it was starting to get certified organic, wasn't labeling itself hydroponic, and customers care, other farmers care. They're a totally different way of producing food. So that transparency is what sometimes is lacking. And, you can go to the farm, like even some of the organic eggs, for example, that don't have the real outdoor access, might have like the porches, things that we're trying to improve under the label. They'll have pictures of these beautiful chickens on pasture on their cartons. And it's just like transparency is what we're going for, You can't present that that's what you are. And then, so that's kind of just opening the doors. The Know Your Farmer videos are just, let's talk about what you're really doing so that you're not fooling anyone. No one wants to pay more for something and then feel like they're being fooled,
Exactly. Yeah. It reminds me of when I think it was in January back on our farm, and I got a call from one of the chefs at the local casino. He's like, hey, we got some, some photographers coming in and we want to do a photo shoot. Can we buy, 10 pounds of salad mix from you for this week for our photo shoot so we can show that we're featuring organic product? And I'm like, I've never heard from you before. I will probably never hear from you again. That 10 pounds of salad right now is incredibly important to 30 of my customers because it's February. There's no way you're going to get that produce because you just want to use it to greenwash your casino.
Right. Yeah. That's one of those, because the farmers know, what's available locally. And when you see stuff that's, on the menu of a restaurant and it's not right, I always say something too. That's always a fun conversation. Who did you get this from? Which farm did you purchase this from? And usually they don't get to the bottom of it. So all of this is just about trying to keep farms viable, right? If there's not honesty in labeling, then, small farms getting started up or don't have established markets, they have trouble getting into it if customers are being greenwashed.
Yeah, because the thing about organic was those extra steps that farmers were taking to increase the nutrients level, to increase the food safety, to increase the hopefully the pay to their workers for a just fair wage. And once you move out of that and move that into the hydroponic side or just into the no transparency side of we don't know what's going on, and so many of the animal operations for certified organic, you don't have that. Then there's no price premium. There's nothing that sets those people, those small farms which are working and producing that incredibly premium product apart. And so, that's for us why we really, really push so many of our farmers to sell direct to retail, because you then do have that you can tell that story, you can show those videos, you can bring those people out to the farm, and you can share with them the real story behind your real organic product.
What do you tell the cynics that say this is just a small little drop in the bucket? You can't feed the world. What do you say to that?
Well, I would just love to point them to, and one of those things is back in 2012 is when I interned for at Polyface Farms, because as an organic vegetable farmer, I realized that was only a drop in the bucket. And so I was like, how can we take this scale? And obviously the scale of this is going where you have to start doing field crops or get certified organic. And when you start doing animals organic, because that's the large scale, that's the intensive proteins that we need to feed our world. And so, that was an incredible experience. Got to meet a ton of crazy, amazing people, met my wife there. But now it's to really see the Ray Archulettos and the Gabe Browns and those folks that are doing thousands of acres. My brother on 800 acres out in Oklahoma doing organic beef. But just those aspects, that's where you start to see the change. And the cool thing is when they start tracking that scientifically, what the soil looks like, what the soil doesn't look like, that is incredible difference. You're starting to see the yield increase. You're starting to see, and it also not necessarily just the yield increase, but the resiliency of the system. Because if you look at a soil that only has a 1% organic matter compared to one that has 6% organic matter, you've got so many more tons and tons of water tied up, which are going to support that system through the drought. And we're seeing more and more crazy weather systems because our soils are getting very depleted. And so once you start to see the proof from that, stand at the bottom of a no-till field, like on Steve Groff out in Pennsylvania. And obviously he's not certified organic, but he is doing a lot of great work with no-till, and we'd love to see him there. And we're working on it. But you stand at the bottom of that no-till field after a heavy rainstorm, and you see there's literally, if there's any runoff, it's clear. It's not literally knee deep, full of soil that's running into the creek and then running out and destroying the fish habitat. So that's the hidden aspect which no one is capturing. And when we start to look at that, we definitely do see the aspect of that that's making the difference.
The amazing thing traveling to so many different farms is realizing that, I know we put no-till up as a huge gold standard, but I've also been to Emily Oakley's farm out in eastern Oklahoma.
Yep.
And her cover, so she rotates, it's just 2 acres. Her and her husband make a full-time living off of this. And she rotates 2 acres in a cover crop for a full year. And then, we'll produce vegetables on it the following year. And the cover crops, by the time she turns them under, are like 3 times the size of her husband. They're like 20 feet tall. They're ridiculous. So she's flail mowing. She'll till that under 8 inches, and her organic matter is going up, and she really hardly brings in any inputs for fertility. She did a little bit of soybean meal, but she's gotten away completely from the chicken pellets that, from all the CAFOs that are in her area. So she's not dependent on that. So, there's so many different ways to make this work. And she's a tractor farm, and I've seen people on that same kind of acreage do it with just hand tools, and that's what's so great about your podcast is that you're not selling one way. You're interviewing all these different farmers, and they're able to think about continuous improvement and sustainability and try to get to the next level of production, but there's no one right answer. So, and we need to support each other and kind of share what we've learned. So, you have that saying, sorry, what are you telling me? There's no better time to start a farm, right?
Yes.
Why do you think that?
Yeah. We are literally inundated right now with incredible education from, YouTube to the podcasts that we have access to the books that are coming out frequently. There's so many amazing books that have been coming out frequently. And we're now like you see, COVID happened, and the farmers I'm working with, I just talked to one yesterday, his sales have doubled. He says, the only reason my sales didn't double in July is I ran out of product. I just didn't have anything else to sell them. I got a good friend down in Tennessee that 4x'd his sales. He's on track to do, he said he'll be close to $500,000 this year on an acre of ground. It's blowing me away just seeing the demand right now. And I think that demand is going to continue because the way we're seeing everything trending, we're not going to be back to normal anytime soon. And local food is something, that connection that can make people feel safe because they can trust that. They can trust the farmer that that's coming from. And on a farm, you can social distance. So, you see that aspect. The other aspect I think is is just the rise of the information age and the rise of social media, and just how easy it is for us as farmers to not only get our message out there, but also to sell our stuff with Shopify, with, Local Line, with even like Facebook shops now that allow you to literally, with a couple clicks of a button, sell your products. I know so many farmers right now that are making money off just selling off Facebook Marketplace. They're just sticking up their cucumbers and they're using that to get in front of new people all the time, who are then coming to their stand or their farmer's market and becoming a new customer of their farm. So I just think it's an incredible, yes, we have our challenges. Yes, there's things, but I think there's always going to be challenges, especially when we're crazy enough to be a farmer. But there's just so many advantages right now. I mean, since I started farming back in 2003, there was literally like 2 or 3 books which people told me to get. And I don't know if it was YouTube a thing in 2003. We sure weren't using it. I remember our family had one email address, and that was an adventure. But I mean, it's just, the listservs out there, Vermont listserv out there, it's so incredible. Just the information sharing that we have, and the advances now, and that we're now starting to see some of these small tool manufacturers grow up too. I mean, TerraTech out of Europe, Johnny's, coming in, just Farmer's Friend down in Tennessee, just sharing, breakthrough tools that allow us to double and triple and quadruple our time savings on the farm, and really focus on the important things, the marketing, the business, the connections with our customers.
Let's talk about that difficult road to success, though.
Yeah.
I remember when it was 5 years in, I was hanging on a thread. My husband and I, we were done. We really wanted to quit. And it wasn't until it just turned out serendipitously that season, we got a knock on the door from a family that wanted to keep their land in farmland. Mm-hmm. So we were renting land and, just tired of that land going up for sale, losing infrastructure, rent going up. And so we decided to quit. And then, fortunately, we're able to secure an FSA loan, all that stuff. How many farmers would you say that get started succeed? 1 in 5? What do you think that percentage is?
Yeah, I think the statistics are 1 in 20.
That sounds about right. And I wanted to say that, but I wasn't sure if that was, And what's the largest reason why people fail?
Yeah, the largest reason why people fail is they don't focus on doing the right things in their business at the right time. So I see some farmers out there, and again, I'm not disparaging them, because research is an incredibly important part of what organic farming is all about. But their first year out there, they're trying to do a trial of 20 types of lettuce or 3 different growing methods. The trials like that need to be saved for what we call the thriving farmers and the mentor farmers, the farmers that are further in the journey, that have that margin in their business to start investing in some of the research. Right at the beginning, I highly recommend you go work on another farm for a couple of years, and and learn on someone else's dime. Because if you don't, you're going to blow through whatever startup money you had. And money is hard to come by, especially as a beginning farmer. Once you have that flywheel going 3, 5, 6 years in, and you've got that customer base, I can sell $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a week easily. You can afford to kind of just like go on that vacation, take that, that risk. But at the beginning, you've got to focus on, what works from the farm that you learned it and how it's working on their farm. Because every region is different. Every farm is going to be different. So if you can intern or apprentice in the area that you want to be in, that's so great. I just interviewed 2 farmers from Sound Pine Farm in Maine, and they were super lucky to be able to intern on a farm literally down the road from their new farm. That farm decided to stop their CSA, and so they basically ramped up and started their CSA, and they're 2 years in, and they're like, I think we're going to make it. And that is amazing to me, because there's so many farms that are like, this isn't for me, or, oh my gosh, this is so much harder than I thought. When the farmers took over our farm in upstate New York, they bankrupted it in less than a year. We had a meeting with them, and I was like, at the end of that year, I was like sitting down like, hey guys, you owe me all this money. What's going on? Because of course I was the one that didn't get paid. And and they're like, yeah, I never actually knew what you did all day. And, and I was like, yeah, it's the marketing, it's the business, it's the meeting with people, it's forming the connections, it's the finances, all that aspects of things which so many people don't understand. And so that's like the thing is, get good education, learn from the best if you can, go work on a farm, but then start narrow. And what I say by start narrow is we recommend just 3 enterprises. So instead of doing pigs, chickens, beef, vegetables, and honey, pick 3. And beef is not a good one to start with because the life cycle is 2 years. I mean, a radish is 21 to 28 days and you've got money coming back in.
Yeah.
Like even elderberries. A lot of people want to do elderberries, and that's great if you have money. And elderberries require so little work, you should do that on the weekends. So I mean, at our new farm here, unfortunately, we'll be starting way too many enterprises, probably because that's just I just love to do too much stuff. Hopefully we will be able to have the revenue to cover it. But we are starting with 3 enterprises. That's what we're starting with. We're starting with mushrooms. Again, 28 days, money back in the bank. Vegetables, again, very quick turnaround. Horticulture, greenhouses are expensive, but literally 4 to 8 weeks and you have money just pouring back into the business enterprise. So that's what we're starting with, because in our working with farmers literally around the world, we see what enterprises are the ones that turn those money quick and get farmers back in cash flow. Because the cash is king. If you have that cash coming in, you can weather a lot of storms. But if you don't, that one Derico that comes through and levels your barn, or that one drought can put you under permanently.
Yeah, and it's such a shame too. We need more farmers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, COVID has showed us that sometimes the grocery store shelves can be empty. Talk about why we need thousands of local farmers.
Yeah. So, that's actually something, because if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, we're probably not going to go back to large scale farming. We'll probably do a half acre, keep it tight. It'll be research and education. But then we started seeing just the need in our community. I mean, it's just looking at the grocery carts. And I'm in checkout, and obviously I'm in there for usually avocados and bananas. I mean, those are the 2 things I'm at the grocery store for.
Yeah, that's what I have to buy too. It's painful.
Yeah, and Jenny's ice cream. So that's our weakness. Or Graders, because they're both local brands here. But I'm looking there and I'm seeing a cart half full of soda. They buying lunch meat, white bread, and soda. Or they are buying produce, but you're in the produce section, the beets are just sad. And they're talking about buying local. And there's a great grocery chain, 3-store grocery chain near us, and they're fabulous. Very high quality product, but still the produce just sucks. And they're buying from supposedly local farmers. And so I'm just like, there is so much of a need here. I mean, we go out to the restaurants, and my wife and I are incredible foodies. And so we go to the restaurants, and there's just a lack of the high quality product that we expected, because again, in upstate New York, we lived in the Hudson Valley, which is the mecca of local farms, one of the meccas of local farms. So back to kind of like, that's why my personal, I'm back in the farming, but let's kind of go more on a global aspect of this is, we're seeing the largest turnover of farmland right now happening ever in our history, because farmers are aging out. And unfortunately, most farms don't have a transition period. So what ends up happening is the farmer ends up dying, and then the land just gets dispersed instead of actually putting a transition period into place. But we're also seeing just big ag broken. We're seeing, COVID running through the processing plants, which means that entire farms are, unethically destroying animals. It's one thing to disc down a field of arugula or romaine. It's another thing to gas or just boil alive, a whole house of hogs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're seeing, I think the other thing we're seeing right now is we're seeing small farms and sustainable farms becoming incredibly profitable too. So we're starting to see, because we've solved some of these problems over the last 20, 30 years, we're now seeing farms buying land. I had a friend of mine in Virginia who just bought a 250-acre farm. I have my farm, the partner that started the business with me, our company, online company, he leveraged himself 2 years ago on a $1.8 million farm property with $0 down, just because of the strength of his business plan. Because the banker was able to look at his business plan and say, you know what, based on just your numbers and your experience, we're investing in you as a farmer because we know that you can do it. And 2 years later, he's proven it. He told me now, he's like, yeah, I have to be careful.
That's pretty rare for a bank to do that. That's impressive.
Well, yes. And actually, the story's a lot longer than that. I think it's episode 6 or episode 4 in our podcast with Ben Beichler. He doesn't share the entire story there, but he shared it later with me just earlier this year. So he's okay with me sharing the entire story, because he's like, now we made it. Now I can share the story. When
Yeah,
I was
getting
underwater, I
funding
wasn't
from
quite
the
sure
bank.
if I wanted to share everything, but
Right.
we're now, so they're now, I think, 600 members in their herd share in Virginia, certified, or not, I don't think they're certified organic, but it's like herd share, grass-fed, dairy, the whole 9 yards.
Awesome.
So it's just, we're seeing that success. We're seeing the broken food system. We're seeing the need, and we're seeing the support system now there for farmers. We're seeing the supply houses have stepped up. The education has now stepped up. The biggest thing right now, I think we're still struggling with, is the meat processing in the U.S. Right now, that's still a major stumbling block for so many farmers. Right now, it's 2 years out for a lot of processors to get an animal booked, which just blows my mind. So we just need more butchers, and we just need less regulation. So the Prime Act is definitely something that is building steam, and hopefully that can get passed, which will allow direct sale. But it's just right now, it's such a great time to be a farmer, and it's so needed right now.
You were trained at Polyface. I think what a lot of people don't realize, and if they talk about transparency, if they really could see inside those barns, that's such a different way of raising meat. Mm-hmm. But 99% of the meat in our country comes from CAFOs. Talk about why we're pasturing meat and what kind of difference that makes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first, if I was a chicken, I would want to be out in the sun instead of in one of those barns where, you're breathing fecal matter all day long and there's no light, and you literally, we're as humans social creatures. But if you and I had to be on this Zoom 12 to 14 hours all day long, and actually sleep next to this Zoom call, you and I would both go crazy very quickly, and we'd start to hate each other very quickly. So, again, animals have a lot of similar traits, and so putting them in that kind of close proximity, literally they have a couple square feet each. So it's just the quality of life in those buildings is awful. They're constantly medicated. The food they eat is GMO, and we know that causes problems. They're frequently mechanically handled all through the process. So, when you're loading the chicks into it, they just throw the chicks in there in piles. And they have to kind of find their way to the, to find food and water and stuff. Then when they're actually taken out of the buildings and to put into processing, there's a mechanical machine that actually gathers them up and puts them up a chute, which causes broken bones and all that kind of stuff. I think the other thing is, once you're at that scale, you don't have optionality. You don't have options. So when a problem like, the processing facility is backed up and our birds are now going to go over 5.8 pounds, we have to just come in and gas the entire house or kill everything, compared to a small farm, which would be like, these are going to be roasters instead of, broilers, and they're going to go to cut-ups. So if you have 1 million birds, there's no way you can easily make that decision. You're locked into this very small paradigm. And the problem is, at that scale too, is just everything is magnified. So your waste is magnified. So now you have an entire manure lagoon from these houses. And God forbid that you have a flood like we've seen over the last couple of years, which comes in and literally empties it into the river. And now you're killing fish all up and down the Mississippi. So there's just so many different things that stack, that when you see the one style where it's a family size farm, that allows you to do things ethically, and you're looking in the eye of every single one of those cows, and sometimes knowing the numbers of all those cows. When I was at Polyface, Joel loves cows. Just going out with him, yes, chickens are cool, and yes, the other animals, but Joel, get him out there in the middle of those cows, and he just stands there, and he'll tell you stories like, that cow, we've had for this long, and this is what happened last year, and they threw this calf over here, or this heifer now. So just being able to get that level of, it's such a much better life for the animals, such a much better life for the farmer, and such a better experience for the environment. The environment is winning. It's a win-win-win for everybody. And when it's a win for processing compared to, you have people which are standing there getting carpal tunnel because all they do 6 days a week is make one specific cut. The butcher is doing an entire cow. So yes, they're a little bit slower, but the quality of the product is better, and they're working their entire body, not just one muscle, and they're not burning out so quickly.
Do you have any response to the whole
well, this food is cheaper and what you're doing is elitist question.
Yeah. That's, and I've heard that, and, I've had do a lot of thinking about that internally, because I feel like I do have a lot of privilege. I wasn't raised, my dad was a doctor, but he worked part-time in a very poor county in Vermont. So, we didn't have a white collar income, and there was times where we were stretching. Thankfully, we had a farm, so we had always had plenty to eat. But if you were to go into some of these inner cities and you look at what these people have available to them, I will say there are challenges there. Now, what I will say, though, is as a farmer, if someone ever came to me and said, hey, we're struggling, I need food to eat, I always had food. We always had a second bin. We always had a second cooler. And we were giving, an average week, we gave 500 to 800 pounds to the food pantries. So there is food out there for a lot of these people. There is, and it wasn't bad food. It wasn't like rotten stuff. It was just oversized. It was twisted. It's just the beet had a nick in it or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think for the people that do have food, because we have money for what we value. If you value your vacation, the $10,000 vacation, you'll take that $10,000 vacation and say the $3 or the $5 eggs are expensive.
Right.
And so it comes to what we value. They're standing there drinking a 99-cent Coke, which will literally just add weight to their waist, when they're haggling over a $2 head of lettuce, which will, incredible nutrition. So for those who actually have money, there's no excuse. There's all sorts of creative ways to rework your food budget. Buy a half of hog, buy a CSA share. One of the most incredible things out there is a CSA share, being able to get a farm share, because the value's there, just incredible value.
Yeah.
But for those that truly don't have money, and those are in the inner city, those food deserts, I don't have all the answers. And I think we do, as a country, need to start addressing that. I think we are in some cases. I don't think we are as much as we could be. But that is definitely something where I still feel like our movement has areas of growth. But I think the thing is, too, there's only so much we can do. First, it's important that the farm builds a farm that's profitable for them, that allows you to farm year after year after year, that allows you to take that couple-week vacation, which is so important, which allows you to go to those organic farming conferences and learn and network and recharge yourself. Because if you can't do that, then you're going to burn out and you're going to
quit,
stop farming.
Yeah.
Or worse, you're going to get injured on the job and you're never going to be able to farm, or you're going to become bitter toward farming. And then people ask, oh, I want to become a organic farmer. It's so great. Oh, no, it isn't. There's this problem and this problem and this problem. So being able to protect you and keep yourself from preventing burnout is just something that's so important. And so that's why I really discourage farmers from saying, oh, I want to start this farm that's nonprofit and we're just going to give all away food for free. And I'm like, if you can get the nonprofit funding for that, that's great. And that can give you the freedom. But if you just say, I'm just not going to take a salary so I can just feed people, no, that's not the way. You've got to first get a proven profitable model, and then you can start giving away. You give out of the abundance that you have, not out of the scarcity.
Yeah. And what's amazing in our area, the nonprofits have actually started finding funds to pay farmers for their donations, which is new. I was actually really tired of getting asked for donations, and then they would present these meals or whatever to raise awareness about local farming. And the whole thing was just on the back of our, donation. So, I think that awareness is changing a little bit. I also, when people bring that up, I completely agree, and we donate a lot. But, we are producing a product that doesn't have all these externalized costs and has so many benefits to our community.
Yeah.
And so in what other industry, when you produce a better product, are you not allowed to charge for it? And someone doesn't go up to, the iPhone 11 and say, what about poverty?
Yes.
It's just,
yeah.
It's a tough one because we are producing food and there are people that are hungry. But I think that, it's something like 75% or maybe even more of the food around the world comes from small, locally produced farms. So, produce your own whenever you can. And I know we can figure that out in the cities too. There's amazing rooftop, compost-based gardens that are just rocking it. So that's always the best way. And then buying in season. But I want to talk a little bit about scale with you. Kilpatrick Family Farm was what, 500 acres or something? It was.
Yeah, so we managed 500 acres
and still succeed.
Yeah, that was, I mean, obviously when I say 500 acres, that sounds good. That was about 350 acres of riparian and woodlot. It's about 100 acres of pasture, and then about 50 acres of tillable land. And then of that 50, we did about 15 to 18 acres of vegetables. But basically, it depends on how you broke it up. We were really big fans of long rotations, and the beautiful aspect of being able where we were and being able to rent the land we were. Yes, we paid for it. It was, we were definitely in a dairy community, so we were having to jockey for that land. But it allowed us to just produce such good product without. And here's the thing with organic is, you've got organic and you know that the soil is the important part. And we know that we obviously want to use as little pesticides and, fungicides as possible. And there are organic ones. So, yes, that is used and that's always a last resort. But the longer you're able to spend on the soil, the less you have to use, the healthier your crops are. So that's why we wanted that 50 acres. That gave us that long rotation. And just the yields that we were producing were, I remember one time I was talking to John Paul. We were both at Stone Barns, the Young Farmers Conference, and he and we were talking, and he was talking about something, what yields he was at, and I was like, well, that's good, JP. I was like, last year, we were at 30,000 pounds per acre on carrots. And he was like, did a double take, and he was like, wow. He's like, how are you growing those? And so I just described the entire process. He was going for a lot more efficiency in harvesting. And so I understand completely why they were growing the way they were. We were going for more just maximum poundage per acre. And what that meant is that was a year-long process to get that maximum poundage per acre. And we were able to because of that. But what scale does is scale magnifies any weaknesses in the chain. So if you're in a half acre and you're 2 days late with your cultivation, it's not a big deal. I mean, those extra couple weeds, it'll be a minute to pull it. But when you're doing 2 acres of carrots, that 2 days late in cultivation means probably 20 to 30 hours of extra hand labor. And that means at that scale, you're really looking at the efficiencies of your equipment. We had a carrot harvester. It was just serendipitously dropped in our lap for a really good price. But that literally cut a week and a half off our harvest window in the fall. So, and at that scale too, it's all about knowing your numbers. So at the smaller scale, you can afford to grow 40, 50 different crops and, each one kind of works for itself. But once you start to scale up and once you start to sell our certified organic product at scale to places like we were at the co-ops and we were considering selling to even Whole Foods. And then when we ran the numbers with them, they weren't a great, at that time, I don't know if they've changed. They weren't a great person to sell to at that time for us. So it just magnifies everything. And it really means that you have a lot more people. And I love working with people. When you have an amazing team, right now, our business, we have some amazing people working for us, which means we're just, stuff happens. I come down in the morning, the team says, oh, did you check this and check this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So when you transfer that into the vegetable world and you have a person that's on a cultivating tractor can just say, hey, Monday cultivating, okay? He goes out and does it and he adjusts everything and you walk through the fields and the fields are clean. That is incredibly freeing. And so on one aspect, a little bit larger farm, which has people, to me is almost the ideal size because you're at efficiency as a scale where every person, man hour is producing an exponential amount of product, which is amazing to see. And Josh Volk and I actually did a podcast about this. Basically, I think it was about labor hours invested per pounds of food produced. And so that's a metric he runs on his farm. And again, Josh is one of those thinkers of our time that he runs circles around me and how he thinks about things sometimes. So I always want to ask him what are you doing now? But so yeah, that scale there. And what it also allows you to do is just support so many people and get them in the right seat on the bus. So we had all sorts of people working for us and some people, we had our CSA coordinator. She was fabulous. The CSA members loved her. She did a great job, but we'd have her out in the farm sometimes to do work. And it wasn't a good experience, because that wasn't her cup of tea. It wasn't her expertise to do that. And so when you've got these people in the roles, they just shine. And so it really allows the people on your farm to really enjoy it. You get to focus what you are good at and really kind of do that all day. And you get to feed so many more people. And you can do really cool things like, donate 1,000 pounds here if you need to for certain events or something to support worthy causes that you're passionate about. But the other thing is one of the ways these very small farms, and I don't want to put down small farms because this is a lot of the way a lot of people get started, and there's incredible flexibility about them, and so I think we need farms of all sizes. But what I will say about small farms is there's certain nutrients that we need as human bodies to survive. And the larger farms are the ones that can produce those nutrients at cost effectiveness. Because these small half-acre farms just can't grow sweet corn and just can't grow winter squash and just can't grow potatoes. And those I just named were some of the top, calorie-dense foods. They just can't grow those. And so what they do is they grow a lot of salad greens. And yes, that's great. And they make money and they can support themselves. But we also need these farms that are going to scale, because that is what's really going to move our movement forward. And in the end, going to move the needle for how many pounds and how many nutrients that the organic system is growing. Because it's not the only pounds, it's the nutrients. And again, because we're nutrient dense and we produce such a much better product, all our food has more nutrients in it, but we also need to think about how can we move the needle on some of those larger crops as well.
Yeah, I've heard farmers describe, as long as that eyes to acres ratio isn't too far off, as long as you're still able to have that human impact in terms of making sure that you don't end up relying on that pesticide, or that soil over there just doesn't get, forgotten about, that eyes to acre ratio, as long as that's there. And it's going to be different depending on if you're growing wheat or Salanova.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so I think the thing too that makes that thing is the roles on the farm. So I kind of talked about all these people, but then also really the farmer to me, and again, it may be not the farmer. And so this is the kind of stuff we work with when we work with some of these larger organizations. There needs to be a field scout. Because the footsteps of the farmer is the best fertilizer. I don't know who said that, but it's so true. It's so true. If you're every single day, and I wasn't every single day, but it was definitely Monday morning. Crew came in, they had a Monday morning for us we had an SOP. There was a Monday morning SOP that everyone followed. So I didn't have to talk to anyone before 11 o'clock if I didn't want to. Yes, we did. Yes, we greeted them. Stuff's going on. But the first couple hours were just spent roaming the fields and really checking up on things. And that is so important, because that is where you get the clarity for what needs to happen, what needs to harvest, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be cleaned. And that really gives you that aspect. And so when you have that position well funded and just well thought out, that gives you that on the pulse aspect. And I've been to these farms, 100-acre farms, where they don't have that. And you literally go out there and there's a field that's, chest high in weeds. And you're like, how are you going to harvest that? Like, well, we'll probably till that under. And that's not serving anybody. It's not great just to have a 100-acre farm, just have a 100-acre farm. And some of these farmers do that. It's like, how many acres are you growing? Or how much is your gross? And I want to say, how much did you take home? How much did you put in your IRA this year? And that's what enough farmers aren't talking about.
I think too, as long as there's access to marketplace, I tried to get my tomatoes into a National Grocers here, and it's seasonal, right?
Yeah.
It's a couple months. I've got tomatoes, and so it's inconvenient for them. But I know it's what the customers want, right? Everybody who shops in that grocery store, they are my farmers market customers. They want my tomato, and they'll pay more for it. And when you're not even given that space because, some farm has said, you have to lock in some sort of contract with us for the full year, and they've monopolized it, that's when we've got a problem, in my opinion. So, because it's not the food that people want to buy necessarily if they have another choice. So I just want to make sure that option is still there. And that's one of the goals.
Absolutely.
Just kind of coming together and making sure the system is in check a little bit with, making sure that the brokers aren't the go-betweens, right? They don't control, whose berries they're going to sell, and they don't have a strong, holdover use. So there's so many things like that are broken in our system.
Yeah. So one of the things on that is, we experienced this is we were locked out of one of our largest wholesale accounts until we actually went certified organic. Because they're like, well, we can't give any price premium until we see that certified symbol. Okay, yes, that's all well and good. But the other thing we did is I was down there all the time in the produce section, every time after farmer's market in there talking to the produce people. And building that rapport meant that they were saying, well, I can try it. I can push the envelope. I can throw, bring us some of your stuff in. And then, it's the other aspect of really just trying to work with those because they're people too. And so if you can develop those relationships, sometimes those are hard relationships to get because those people are so overworked. People in produce departments, they're usually high turnover. It's not great pay. And they've got to really love what they got to do because they got to get in there early and they work usually like 4 or 3 a.m. to noon or something like that. So being able to connect with them can be so important and can really help you make things happen.
Yeah. Figuring out all these pieces of the pie, right? It's complicated. 1 in 20.
Well, then too, what if you have an overage? And then that's when you're starting to scramble because obviously we try not to produce 1,000 extra pounds of tomatoes a week.
Yeah.
But if there's a bumper crop or you have a hot spell and it moves in, then that's when you're scrambling. So that's when you're like, okay, how do I get rid of these? And that's when you try to. So that the other aspect of as a community, as a culture, we've lost that aspect of preserving. Is that if people don't know what to do with 40 pounds of tomatoes or 20 pounds of cucumbers.
Right.
It was interesting when the pandemic hit, one of the first things that sold out, obviously it was the toilet paper, but it was deep freezes. Because everyone was like, oh my gosh, I want to start saving some food, but no one had deep freezes. And so everyone went and bought them. And literally, I had farmers saying, I will pay double to get that.
Yeah. I think moving forward, this pandemic is just one of, many struggles that we're going to face. And so building in this resiliency in our food systems, small farmers are able to adapt their markets so quickly. It was like, okay, I know farmers market sales are going to be down this year. People don't want to go out and socialize. So let's switch our markets. And that's what's so great about, just the resiliency of the local food system. So tell us about Growing Partners. What are you going to be able to keep doing that and consulting even when you're farming more?
So what we're doing as a team, we've had a lot of long talks about this, and actually, so our main company is we're streamlining. So we're basically we won't be running as many cohorts of our courses, especially live. So we're doing that, and we'll also we also did start another podcast. So what we did is it's called Building the Farm on Central Avenue. We are streamlining that part of the business. We've actually been spending the last couple months of really working hard on some of our content and building out a lot of the things that we want to get off our plate. So that stuff is pre-done. And obviously building this farm for us is an incredible amount of content too for us, and just being able to show people what we're doing. Every single aspect. So back to the podcast though, the new podcast, it's actually shot very vlog style. It's not video, but it's basically short form audio. So, and it will be me, it'll be my wife, it might be, the kids might, be in the background, but it's basically, as we're going about it, building something, it's the thoughts that are happening in the moment. Because that's the kind of stuff that in a year and 2 years, you completely forget. Oh yeah, we had that leak in the ceiling, and this is what we did about it. And this is why it's actually a lesson for farmers, because do you hire it out at $1,200 or do you do it yourself and it's going to take you 3 hours? So those are the kind of decision making every farmer needs to kind of understand. And, it's just it's something that, it's incredibly valuable for them. And so that's where we're putting it out. It's going to be published just right through Anchor, which will obviously go to all the different platforms. But that allows us because our current podcast, it goes to the editor, there's show notes, there's a big, it's an expensive podcast to produce. There's a lot that happens. This one, there might be an episode every day. There might be a week between episodes. It's just going to be as it's happening, that raw aspect of building a farm every single step of the way. So we're super excited about that. And you were also super excited about the live aspect. So this is the one thing which I'm just literally thrilled beyond belief, is that because we're building a farm from scratch, I get to invite some of my really cool friends from around the world to come help me build it. I've got foodscapers that are going to come out and help us build out the hedgerows and around the house. I've got, farm designers that are going to come out. I've got mushroom people that can come out and hold classes here. We've got a great barn here, which is just large enough to probably have like 25, 30 people in there, which is a great class size. And it also gave us 2 spare bedrooms to have people here as well. So
always need housing.
Invitations always open for you. We're just like tickled pink with the opportunities that it allows. It means I have to be incredibly focused about every single hour. And we have added to our team. We actually hired, with this in mind, knowing that I was going to have to spend a lot less time on it. But the new hires are literally, it's amazing, the network that we've built as our company has grown, because we just get in our world, these cool people. And then they have these other skills besides farming that they want to help us with. So Heidi, we hired back in February. Her whole strength is the finance side of farming. She's written multiple USDA loans. She's helped multiple people navigate the grant world. And so she brings that incredible talent list to our team. And then Jessica, who we just hired for social media, she's a new farmer. They haven't even started yet. So she is our perfect avatar of people we want to sell to. So she was on a meeting the other day and we're like, what do you think? And she's like, she got this great answer. And we're like, oh, we never thought of that. Because again, as in this world 16 years, there's just so much going on up here. I don't think about the questions people ask when they're just getting started. It's like you and I, we just automatically know, to think about shade when we're positioning a greenhouse, but so many people don't.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of the long answer, but we're getting kind of excited about it. So
yeah, you've got your work cut out for you.
Yes, we absolutely
I'm so excited,
do.
Michael. That's going to be really amazing to follow you through all this. I'm so glad we get to. I was nervous that you were just going to commit back to farming in your community, but of course not. So
no, I'm too passionate about the greater world, and it's a one aspect, and I'm torn because one aspect, I know farmers need education. And so that's what my passion is so for that. But the other aspect is my local community needs food. And so being able to hopefully do both of those together, which means that our farm here will probably be a lot less profitable than it could be, because we'll be hiring a lot more middle management, because again, I won't be able to put in the 60-hour weeks that I would like to. But that's okay for me. We're feeding our community. Because we have the other business, I'll be able to take some of my income from that. And so I think we'll be fine.
As you age, your back doesn't want to put in 60 hours anymore.
Yeah, I'm already feeling that at 32. So,
well, thank you, Michael. I really appreciate your time. You're a busy man, and I'll just keep following what you're doing.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. We hope that you'll subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a rating and review. A video version of this interview, as well as the full transcript with links related to our conversation, is found at realorganicproject.org/episode 46. Next time, our guest will be soil microbiologist and former USDA researcher, Dr. Chris Nichols. To find a Real Organic farm near you, visit realorganicproject.org/farms. See you next time.